Welcome to 20 Minute Tabletop, a weekly podcast about board, card and miniature games. Now on this podcast, we're not known for chasing the latest and greatest and the newest, but we're going to break the mold today and discuss Kill Team 24 or 3rd edition, which is coming out at the end of this week, October the 5th, 2024. Now, I feel like I'm in an abusive relationship with Games Workshop. I get mistreated time and time again, and yet, for some reason, some unknown reason, I keep crawling back to them. And to give you an example of how this happened, in the last edition of Kill Team, which is a miniature skirmish game that we're going to be talking about in this episode, I bought a paper product, a rulebook if you will, called the Compendium, and it listed all of the teams. And I bought this from Games Workshop, talked to the guy in the shop, and he said, yeah, this is what you need. If you just want to play casually, it's got everything, and it's all perfectly up to date. Got it home, had a bit of a read online, and admittedly, this is my fault. I should have done it the other way around. I should have read online and then spent my money. But I found out that all of the content in that book was out of date. It had been FAQ'd and errated, and I just needed to look online for the updated rules. So more fool me. And that happens all the time. I buy card packs and rule books, and then find out that they're actually out of date by the time they've even hit the shelves in the shop. So that was the last straw in the last edition. I said I'm never buying into another Games Workshop game ever again. I've had enough. Well, 3rd edition's out, and they've decided that they're going to release all the rules, the core rules, and the data slates or the rules for the individual models online via an app for free and via the Warhammer community website. Now, I can't help but feel like I'm being tricked somehow, but I've really thought about this, I've looked into it, and it does appear that all the rules are free, like virtually every other producer of miniature games in the universe, and you can just download them and play. And the only skin in the game is to buy the models from Games Workshop, which, to be fair, is a perfectly fair trade. Now, if you were really militant about this, you could go as far as proxying your own models by 3D printing them from someone like One Page Rules or Station Forge. And for casual play, that's absolutely fine. And I do think it is a great game, and it's worth exploring. And I do think that there's a lot of improvements from 2nd to 3rd edition. And that's what we're going to discuss today. I'm going to give you board gamers in the audience and people who haven't played Kill Team a bit of an overview about what the game is about and why you should maybe check it out. And if that tickles your fancy, or you're a gamer who's played 2nd edition, then we're going to go into the differences between 2nd and 3rd edition and why perhaps this is the best edition of Kill Team to date. So for the uninitiated, what is Warhammer Kill Team? Well, essentially, it's a tabletop miniatures game using Warhammer 40,000 models, so it's a sci-fi game, about 8 to 12 models per side, and it's what's known as a skirmish game. And we covered this in great detail back in episode 3, where we talked about 5 different skirmish games from all kinds of publishers outside of the Warhammer world. But Warhammer and Games Workshop are definitely the world leader in terms in volume of sales and popularity. And they produce all kinds of games in a fantasy and sci-fi universe, from Warcry, which is their fantasy skirmish offering, Blood Bowl, which is kind of like fantasy football with orcs and goblins and elves and dwarves, and Age of Sigmar, which is their full-scale army game set in the fantasy world. But for sure, their biggest product and most famous product is the full-scale army game Warhammer 40,000. Now, controversially, I've played this a few times. I just don't get on with it. I don't think it's a particularly good game. It's certainly not to my taste, although lots and lots of people love it, and fair play to them. So if Warhammer 40,000 is the full-scale army game, which simulates entire battalions going at each other, Kill Team is the condensed version where it zooms in on the squad action, where you have commando teams going in to perform sabotages, elite operations, and undercover missions. And it's played out in about an hour, between, like I said, 8 and 12 models. So it's much quicker, it's snappier, it's a lot cheaper. And unlike Malifaux, which is actually my all-time favourite skirmish game, there's a huge community everywhere in the world. So basically, if you've got a gaming shop, you're going to be able to find someone to play against, which sadly can't always be said about Malifaux. Now, whilst quite a lot has changed between 2nd and 3rd edition, the essence of the game is still the same. With your squad of 8 to 12 models, you will take alternating activations with your opponent. And the aim of the game is to score as many victory points as you can across the 4 rounds of the game. Now, there's been a few changes across the editions, and in this edition, the maximum points you can score is 21. So although the game is called Kill Team and a big part of the game is killing other models, the actual aim of the game is to maximise the number of victory points you score. And you can do this by even having all of your models killed, and at the end of the game, if you've got more points than your opponent, you win the game despite everybody being dead. So it becomes very tactical and not just to wipe the other person out off the map, which is something I always enjoy in a skirmish game. Another thing that I really like about this game is it's unusual in the board size that it uses. So most skirmish games are played on a 3-foot map, occasionally a 4-foot map. But in this one, it's 22 by 30 inches, which is a lot smaller and can really fit on a coffee table. So in terms of accessibility, it's much easier to get into, especially if you're going to use the Games Workshop official terrain packs, because you can just buy what is required. And they release core boxes. So the latest one that's just coming out on October the 5th is called Hivestorm. In it, you'll get 2 teams, a core rulebook, all the tokens you need, and some officially sanctioned plastic terrain, which you might find in tournament play. Depending on which particular edition of the box you'll get different terrain packs. But of course, you can use your own, and it would be a shame not to plug the stuff that we do on our Patreon, which is Foldscape. So if you don't have the space for all this stuff, because the terrain does actually take up quite a whack of space, we produce a variety of terrain for both fantasy and sci-fi, which folds down and fits in an envelope. So aside from the individual teams, a roll-up mat, and some potentially fold-flat terrain, you've got a really in-depth tactical game which takes up very little space to store and not that much more to actually get out and play. So before I get into what I really like about 3rd edition and why I think it's a lot better than 2nd and of course 1st edition, let's just describe how a turn will go so you get a flavour for how the game works. It's an alternating activation game, so you will move one of your models and then your opponent will move one of their models. Each model will have a number of activation points, typically 2 or 3. And those activation points can be used to do things like move, charge, fall back out of combat if you're getting battered, shoot a weapon, you can dash to try and secure an objective, pick up markers, fight, and do a number of mission-specific actions such as tagging an objective marker or switching on a transmitter. So all the time, you're trying to maximise the efficiency of your team by spending the actions to get to the right place at the right time so that you can use mission actions to score points, to try and kill opposition models, either to score points or deny them scoring opportunities. And the 3D nature of the terrain means that you're thinking across not only the space of the mat and hiding behind cover, but also taking advantage of what they call vantage points. So getting up high to get extra shots in and negate the cover benefits gained by the opposition. And I never miss an opportunity to just bore people with how much I love Malifaux, but I actually think that Kill Team handles the climbing and the height and the 3D aspect of wargaming much better than Malifaux in this instance. Climbing and dropping and seeking vantage points in this game is a lot more fleshed out than I've seen in a lot of other games, and I really enjoy it, and it opens up some interesting opportunities for Kill Team design. So one of the latest Kill Teams released with the new Hivestorm box is called the Tempestus Aquilons. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And they're basically like drop troops, paratroopers if you will. And they have sort of gravity chutes, so they can jump off buildings without incurring movement penalties, float down and engage. And whilst they may be weaker in other areas, it encourages players to play into that drop in late and surprise the enemy play style. And each of the kill teams are designed so that they've got their own flavour. Now in typical Games Workshop style, there is a meta, but that's true of all games really. If you want them to be competitive at the very highest levels of play in sanctioned tournaments at Worlds or Warhammer World, then probably you are going to be having to buy the latest and greatest kill teams, and I suspect there will be power creep as there is in a lot of games. But for the casual player or club tournament player, there's absolutely nothing wrong with picking a kill team and having that as your main team for the most of an edition. And you know what? It's fine. It's a skirmish game, so a new team is about £40. You may go through one or two a year. I mean, I'm sure there's lots of people who will buy many, many more than that, and that's up to them. But it's not quite the same feel bad as having one codex dropped in the main 40,000 game and then finding out that £500-600 of models are either irrelevant or massively weaker than what you signed up for. So hopefully that's given you a good flavour of what the game's about and why you might want to check it out. It's a great way to get to play some of these really fun, flavourful and quite famous factions from the world of Warhammer 40,000 without signing up to the full-scale army game, the expense and, frankly, in my opinion, the tedium of playing that particular system. So with that as an introduction to the world of Kill Team, and I do think it is a brilliant world and one that I encourage you to get involved with, let's discuss my 10 favourite, nothing like a listicle, 10 favourite differences between 2nd and 3rd edition and why I think it's now the best time to get involved with Kill Team. So number 1, the rules and the data slates are now free and going to be released in an app. Now, at the time of recording, that app hasn't been released yet, so we don't know how good it is. But any amount of cursory Google searching, you could be able to download the rules. I mean, I've downloaded a really well put together Kill Team reference sheet by a Reddit user named Armagonix. And this cheat sheet gives you absolutely everything you need to play the rules. Now, if you're familiar with 2nd edition, there's really not a lot more to say. One of these cheat sheets is basically the starting point as far as I'm concerned. And these resources are only going to get better over time. Now, the second thing that I like about New Kill Team 3rd edition is the variety of missions which are available to the players. So in the previous edition, there was 3 main missions, shared objectives that the players would play. In this edition, there are 9. Now, technically, these are approved ops and available only as a card pack for a cost of around £20 from Games Workshop. And that's a tournament pack that's going to be around for a year or two. Now, I don't really have a problem with that, and I don't think that's too bad. Although, again, Weird Miniatures, my favourite game, Malifaux, they have the equivalent tournament pack, is called Gaining Grounds, and that's released for free through the app, which I think obviously is a much better system, because at the end of the day, you're not looking to sell £20 card packs once a year. You're looking to sell as many £40 miniature sets as you possibly can. So to me, placing barriers to players getting involved at the higher levels of the game, the tournament play, is cutting the nose off to spite the face a little bit. I would have thought it'd be a better system to release all of the game information for free and then enjoy the increased user base buying up model kits and competing in tournaments. Now, the same Reddit user, Armagonix, has produced this approved ops card pack as a printable, a download from information that Games Workshop has released to different YouTubers as part of their pre-release hype cycle. So unofficially, you can access this information for free. I don't really consider it pirating because you could just use this information from a YouTube video. But if you want the official cards, and they have got a nice graphic style to them, they're quite a nice artifact to have as a companion to the game, then you can purchase this as the approved ops card pack. But what's really nice about the new crit ops, or primary missions, shared objectives, is not only are there 9 of them instead of 3, because the 3 was starting to get a bit stale towards the end of the 2nd edition, but all of these require the use of mission actions. So in the 2nd edition, you would pretty much have to save some operatives, maybe 20-30% of your team, just to sit in backfield, tagging an objective every turn. Now, in this version, you're actually using your activation points to interact with these mission objectives. So it feels a bit more interactive, and you're sort of discouraged from just having models sitting at the back, beeping the button every single turn. So that is a real major improvement. It's going to add a lot more variety and enjoyment to the game, certainly for a casual player like me. So number 3 is the way you select your mission objectives, I think, is massively improved and a lot simpler in this version of the game. So in the previous one, you would have a shared objective. It's now called a crit op, and there's one of 9 to choose from. But there's also a tac op. Now, this is effectively the secret objective, which you'll be trying to do, and you'll reveal it at a point when you can start scoring victory points off it. In the 2nd edition, you would choose 3 of these tac ops, these secret objectives, from really quite a large bank. So you'd have faction-specific tac ops, in addition to the tac ops that are available to both players. So this has been simplified. There's no more faction-specific tac ops, as far as I can tell. You just choose 1 tac op instead of 3 from one of your kill team's archetypes. Now, an archetype is basically the type of kill team you're running, and each kill team will have 2 named archetypes. So it could be seek and destroy, so these are very aggressive teams. You could have security, recon, or infiltration for the more stealthy teams. So now you just have 1 shared objective, 1 secret objective chosen from a bank that are available to your team, and now in the game of Kill Team, you are actually rewarded for killing opponents, and the 3rd way of scoring is known as the Kill Op. And in the Kill Op, you are rewarded on how many models you've killed based on the type of team you're playing against. So if it's an elite team with very powerful Space Marines, you'll receive more points for killing a single Space Marine than, say, playing against demons, where you knock off one very cheap and largely useless little Nurgling. So 3 ways to score. the primary mission, the crit op, the secret mission, the tac op, and also killing your opponent, the kill op. But what's really nice in Kill Team 24 or 3rd edition is what's going to be my number 4, and it's that you will secretly choose what is called your primary objective. And effectively, for this, at the end of the game, you'll receive 1.5 times the number of points, so half a game. You get more points for scoring your primary objective. So this introduces an element of bluffing to the game, which I think was missing in the previous editions. And just rounding off this discussion about scoring, there's now no scoring in the first turn at all. And then turns 2, 3, and 4, you can score a maximum of 2 victory points per mission objective, whether that's tac op, kill op, or crit op. So 3 rounds times 6, maximum of 18 points. Plus, of course, you get your primary objective bonus of potentially another 3 points. So over the 3 scoring rounds, maximum points of 21, which I think is nice and clear. And it's a change that I really appreciate. Numbers 5 and 6 in my list are changes which have made the accessibility much better to the game. There was a few things which just beggared belief in my opinion. Unlike every single wargame on Earth, Kill Team 2nd edition didn't use inches. They elected to use shapes. They used square, triangle, circle, and hexagon, which is a bit annoying, but you'd have thought, yeah, that's fine. That'll be intuitive. You see, a triangle's got 3 sides, so it'll be 3 inches. And a square's got 4 sides, so that's got 4 inches. And maybe circle could be 1 side, so it's 1 inch. No, triangle, 1 inch. Circle, 2 inch. Square, 3 inch. Hexagon actually makes sense, 6 inches. So the whole thing just made no sense from the get-go. Now, that just added a level of thinking which didn't add anything to the game. I can presume was only done to try and sell Kill Team-specific measuring widgets, because you didn't have the intuition of thinking, oh, I'm about 3 inches away from that objective, I can get to it next turn. You would be thinking, I've got circle away? What on earth does that mean? So you're converting it back into inches all the time anyway. Plus to which, it effectively meant that all the operatives had 6 inches of movement, because the subtlety of having a 5 versus 7 inch movement didn't really happen. You would have 3 circle movement, which again is just an extra, very easy but exhausting bit of mental arithmetic you have to do. Now, there's opinions that vary about this, but I would say probably the majority of Kill Team players are happy to see the back of this totally pointless bit of bloat to the rules. And talking of bloat and badly written rules, was maybe the worst line of sight, cover and obscuring rules I've ever seen. Now, the obscuring rules I won't even bother discussing, because it was an absolute word soup. It was almost you needed to be a solicitor or a lawyer to interpret. But my number 6 is much improved line of sight, cover and obscuring rules, which now are pretty much intuitive. You read them in the rulebook or the cheat sheet and it makes sense. There's no 20-minute long YouTube videos trying to make sense of the rules as written. But one thing that I am disappointed to see is repeated again in 3rd edition is the Games Workshop thing of having visibility lines to point on the actual model. So if you have a tiny bit of a gun peeking out from round a corner, then that model is visible. Even though the obvious intention of the placement of that model is to put it in cover, you have the gun facing the wrong way and it sticks out, okay, the whole model's visible, which doesn't make a lot of sense. I wish they would have done it as they do in Malifaux, which is line of sight to base, because now people playing the game at competitive level are encouraged not to do interesting basing schemes, because if it increases the height of the model, then it makes it more visible. So that's a shame. Just do it to the base. I think that would be a great improvement, and it's certainly something that I'll be house ruling. Now, at number 7 is the changes to Overwatch, which is now called Counteract. Now, as you can imagine in a skirmish game, different teams will have different model counts. And you may have an elite team where you've got very powerful operatives, but fewer of them. Or you may have like a spam team where you've got 10, maybe 15 much weaker operatives. Now, even though an elite operative is going to be able to knock off the weaker ones more easily, teams that have a much greater number of bodies are at an advantage for being able to tag objectives and generally cover a greater area of the map. So most skirmish games have a way of counteracting that. In Malifaux, it's a thing called pass tokens, where you can basically spend a pass token to allow your opponent to take an activation ahead of you, so you get to see where they go and get the advantage of reacting to what they've just done. Now, in Kill Team, there was a mechanism called Overwatch, and basically, if you'd run out of activations, then you got to take a shot at a ballistic penalty, so you took a worse shot. Now it's called Counteract. You can basically do anything. You can move, although to a maximum of 2 inches. You can tag mission objectives. You can even charge and engage and shoot, not at any negative to the shot. So I think it's a good way of balancing the game out and makes it that little bit less feels bad. You get to play and feel like you're influencing the game, even though you're at a model disadvantage. My number 8 is the changes to equipment. Now, in order to personalize the team that you play in, you can either choose which particular operatives you're going to do. In some teams, there's no choice of models, but in others, you can maybe choose to drop a sniper and maybe put a close combat specialist in. But one way of customizing teams available to everyone was to choose equipment. And now, in addition to the thematic and kill team specific equipment that you can take for your models, there's also a range of universal equipment. And what's really nice about this is it's got things like different grenade options. You can take ladders so that it evens out some of the abilities from models that have flying. You can get up to higher areas of the map more easily. You've got portable barricades and heavy barricades. You've got all kinds of choices. But you just take 4 pieces of equipment and it's assumed that everyone on your team has it. So instead of having to go through the awkward putting a little elastic band over the base of a model to show that, oh, this one's carrying a grenade, but this one's carrying some kind of sniper scope, just everyone has all the equipment, and when you use it, that equipment is spent, as it says on the card. So that's a real nice ease of life and quality of life improvement that makes the game easier to play and doesn't lose any of the tactical subtlety. The penultimate item on my list is the changes to how command points and initiative work. So at the start of the game, you'll choose basically a rock, paper, scissors-like system. You will choose either equip, ploy, or reposition. Equip beats ploy, ploy beats reposition, and reposition beats equip. So rock, paper, scissors as to who gets go first. And each one of those options will give you a different benefit. So if you choose equip, you get to get a 5th piece of equipment for your team. If you choose reposition, then you get to take a free movement at the beginning of your turn. And if you choose ploy, then you get to do one of your strategic ploys for free, so without having to spend any of your command points. So that's how it's resolved before turn 1. But during the game, it's basically a roll-off. If you get a higher number, then you win. And some teams can spend their command point to get re-rolls on this initiative roll, but pretty much it's down to the dice. And in Kill Team, initiative order matters particularly on the last turning point, which is a weird word actually. Turning point is just what they call a turn. So on the last turning point, initiative really matters. It can often swing a game. So what they've done in this edition is if you lose the initiative roll, then you get a free command point. And a command point can be spent to do game-altering things like a strategic ploy, which may allow your models to do something really cool, like take an extra shot or hit a lower target number. Or at the base level, command points can be just spent to re-roll dice. So it's a major advantage to have these command points. So now, instead of coming into the last turning point, losing the initiative roll and thinking, oh, there's not a lot I can do, I just hope it goes badly, you can actually influence the action on the map by use of your command point. So I think that's a really nice change that, again, allows you to have more influence. And finally, is what Games Workshop are calling their classified updates. I started this podcast by joking that I felt like I was in an abusive relationship with Games Workshop. Every time they drew me in and I bought their products, they would either errata them where I couldn't use them anymore, or it turned out the book or card pack was out of date before I'd even got the shrink wrap off. So the fact that they're releasing the rules for free and they're doing now something called classified updates has actually done quite a lot to restore the trust for me. And it also gives me faith that they're really backing Kill Team as a long-term product, which is always a worry. So when a Kill Team's rules pack is released along with the models, they've now said it's going to have 4 years of legality at classified events. So if you care about playing at the World Championships or an officially sanctioned tournament, you can be happy with the fact that your £40 purchase is good for 4 years. Now, you know my mental arithmetic if you've listened to the podcast on this. There's not a lot of hobbies where £40 can get you hundreds of hours of enjoyment. So I've got absolutely no problem with that. And even more than that, they've also said they're going to give you 6 years of support over the 2 editions. So even though it's no longer classified, they'll continue to have balance changes and updates so that you can play them casually or you can play them at tournaments. You know, they might just not be as good as other teams. So that is massive for me. You know, in the last edition, I bought Gelapox and I was half expecting, oh, new edition, that's just going to be wiped off. No, actually, from as far as I understand, that will have tournament legal rules for a good couple of years, and then they'll update it so that I can play it casually. Now, of course, you could say, don't care about any of that. Just play the game you want to play. And if you're playing casually, that is, of course, absolutely fine. But I'm a person who enjoys meta discussions, at talking to other people at the game club and knowing what's going on in a game. So that's all very well and good, but it requires a degree of faith in the publisher that they're not just going to nickel and dime you for every last penny in the latest release. So they're supporting the models and they're supporting you buying in to their game, which I think is great. It's a win-win all round. I'm more likely to pick up a model pack now, knowing that it's going to be supported for potentially 6 years. I think it's a really positive change. So that just about brings to the end our discussion of the new version of Kill Team and about the most finger on the pulse, bleeding edge podcast you'll ever get from 20 Minute Tabletop. Usually we're in the business of discussing older games. But if you do enjoy discussing the latest and greatest, then one place you can do that is on our Discord server, which is linked in the description. We've got a growing number of people who have lovely conversations. And, we're even been sending each other packages and organising to play online games and things. It's a great community and we'd love you to get involved, particularly if you've listened to the podcast for a while now. If you want to support in a different way, then you can either leave us a review on one of the platforms, and that actually really helps us. So if you can do that, please do that. We would really appreciate it. But if you wanted to lend even more support and help us cover some of the costs, then we have a Patreon, which is linked in the description. And of course, we will give you something back in return. You get access to the 10mm miniatures game, Decline, but you'll also get access to Foldscapes, which is a weekly download of a piece of fold-flat wargaming terrain. I do it for both sci-fi and fantasy. So whether you play a game like Age of Sigmar or Malifaux, or even Kill Team, you'll get terrain packs that look beautiful on the tabletop, but critically store away in an envelope so it doesn't take up your entire house. Either way, we're just happy that you listen to this podcast, and we hope you return for the next episode. So until next time, we'll see you then.